What I don't think you should do is have a financial system that is set up to extinguish risk.
And we're number one for international debt issuance. So yes, I guess we are going to attract some crime, and we do work to get that crime out.
What is your response to that? That yes, we want to keep people safe, but we also need to protect people's privacy online.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you so much. Wonderful to see so many of you here and several friendly faces too. So welcome back to those who've been to Politico events before. My name is Kate Day. I'm Politico Europe's Deputy Editor-in-Chief. I run the team here in the UK, many of whom you're going to see today. And what a time to be meeting. It's such an inflection point in the world. It feels like this mega election year that, of course, has slightly exhausted, but also really excited all of us here at Politico. We care very much, of course, about the horse race of politics. We cover that day by day and like nothing better than to know what's really going on inside all the corridors of power and the bars around them. But we also really feel our coverage comes alive when we start to unpack what that then is going to mean, where the policy is really going to head and how much these fireworks of political elections are really going to change the world for all of us with a kind of professional stake in politics. That's where Politico feels strongest, and that's where we're most excited to play, and that's where we'll spend our time today. So, of course, lots to talk about. We're going to look at whether the new UK government feels regulations in the right spot. How do they balance growth, managing risk? There's all sorts to talk about there. Do they tack closer to Europe with obviously an incoming commission? Our team in Brussels are all over that in the last few weeks, and today's really quite a key day there too. And then over in the White House, we're looking ahead to Trump, so we can't ignore the US election and what an incoming Trump administration will do. So much to talk about. We're going to get right down in the weeds, as I hope you would expect from us. We very much want your questions. We want to make this useful for you, so please use the Slido app to keep the questions coming. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And for those of you who don't know, they're going to introduce themselves in a minute, but today is really the stars of the show from a Politico point of view are our financial services team here in the UK that's headed by Fiona Maxwell. For anyone who doesn't already receive our newsletter and alerts and articles. There's a morning newsletter, much like a playbook, but focused on the world of financial services regulation. So written very much with people like you in mind. There are free trials available. So if you don't have it already, please speak to one of the team and we can get it. But without further ado, the final thing for me to do is just to thank the sponsors. ClearPay, ISDA and City of London. Thank you very much. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. And then to hand over to Fiona and the team to get the conversation started. So over to you guys. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. Good. Thank you all so much for coming. It's going to be a great day. We've got so much to talk about. And as Kate said, it's been an absolutely huge year in terms of geopolitics, and the financial services industry is not immune from everything that's been going on, even in the wider context in the EU and the US, and obviously with a new government here. I think we'll just get started straight away because we just have about 10 minutes to discuss what we think kind of are the main topics we'll discuss today, and also what's going on in the financial services world at large. So I will introduce my top team. So at the end, we've got Hannah Brenton, our senior reporter, and Eleanor Myers, our reporter. And for those of you who know us, you will notice that we are missing one reporter today. James Fitzgerald, our resident Aussie, is actually back home in Australia for a couple of weeks, so unfortunately he couldn't make it. But let's get straight to it. I mean, I just heard in the initial video last year, the former City Minister, Andrew Griffith, saying, you know, we don't want a system that entirely eliminates risk. Now we've got a whole new government, a different party, a different side of the political spectrum, but the message seems to be the same. And Hannah's got a terrific story out this morning about how, you know, the Labour Party really wants to get quite close with the City of London. It's said things like, what do you need? Let's co-design regulation with you. So what do you think, Hannah? Is that, you know, what does that mean for the City of London?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big themes that we've been trying to cover at Politico, is the kind of continuity between the previous government and this government in terms of the attitude towards the city, and particularly also some of the language that we've seen the top of the Labour Party use, including Rachel Reeves in the Mansion House speech on risk-taking, and that's what the city really wants to hear from the government as well. So they've really been on a charm offensive, and it's also been really well received, I think, by the city. So they're very much kind of working in lockstep with the city at the moment on what they want, on the policies that they want, in the bid to have growth and improve the competitiveness of the city as well. They're very much on board with that message.
And they are explicitly encouraging risk-taking now. You know, Rachel Reeves said in her Mansion House speech, we don't want to eliminate risk from the system. She wants the FCA, the PRA, to find ways to encourage firms, encourage consumers to take more risk. And I think that's interesting as well, because we do have entirely independent regulators here. But in the last 4 months, the Labour Party's got a little bit involved with some of the topics. One of those is what we like to fondly call the name and shame proposals from the FCA. So Eleanor actually was up nice and early this morning reading a document from the FCA on its latest name and shame proposals. You should have had that in your inbox about 40 minutes ago. But Eleanor, maybe you can explain the latest and what the FCA is thinking, and also whether this kind of is enough to appease the Labour Party's concerns that it kind of won't be a competitive proposal.
So the FCA announced this morning that they are going to shift their name and shame policy in certain ways. This is the policy by which they're going to announce investigations publicly if they believe that it's in the public interest. So they're now going to give firms 10 days to be able to make formal complaints. And they're also going to be considering the impact on the firm and the impact on the market when they choose whether to announce it publicly or not. And that previously was not being considered. Whether it will be enough, that remains to be seen. The FCA said in the document, we only bring out 10 to 12 investigations a year, so they did kind of try and emphasize that it's very unlikely that they would feel the need to publicly name firms. They gave the example of their investigation into PwC and its audit of London Capital Finance as one which, you know, perhaps would have been named publicly. And their reasoning behind this was the FCA was kind of, you know, criticised in Parliament during that period, and you know, they believe it would have been better for consumers in that case. And you know, it suggests perhaps because of this reversal that there has been a nudge from the Treasury that obviously wasn't made public. That is a different kind of style than the Tories, because Jeremy Hunt did say publicly that he wanted the FCA to relook at the policy. And I think that's a theme. You've seen it as well with the payment systems regulator and its decision to reverse its authorised push payment fraud reimbursement policy, quite a mouthful. The upper limit was supposed to be £415,000, and then in about a week and a half beforehand, they said it's going to be £85,000 in line with FSCS. And you know, we had heard that there had been, you know, a bit of a nudge from the Treasury, but behind the scenes.
Yes. Okay. Great. And let's talk a bit more about the City of London in the context of, you know, the wider world. Obviously, we'll talk quite a lot about the US election, things like potential tariffs. But I'm really interested, for those of you who don't know, Hannah has been with Politico for many years and used to be based in Brussels, so is also an EU expert. So I'm really interested what you think this kind of Brexit reset that the Labour Party is pursuing, if and how that will impact financial services.
Yeah, I think it's a really big open question, but the answer is probably not that much, because a lot of the dividing lines on financial services have kind of been set since Brexit. So the question really is, what the government would like to see from Brussels and what Brussels is kind of willing to give as well. But there is a kind of outstanding question, and we have a panel later in the day on the EU-UK relationship as well, but particularly on Euroclearing, the EU granted, it's the only area that the EU granted the UK equivalence after Brexit, or still is granted equivalence, and that comes up soon. So the new incoming Financial Services Commissioner in Brussels needs to decide pretty quickly what to do about that. And it's likely it will get extended, but there's still questions about how long, and the tone of that might also say something about where the relationship is heading to.
Yes, that's a very interesting point. And also we are interviewing City Minister Tulip Siddiq later, so I'll definitely be asking her about that. And Rachel Reeves is actually going to Brussels for the Eurogroup on December the 9th. So all of this does point to kind of closer ties with the EU, but of course we'll see how the US election and the potential for the UK to want to perhaps create closer ties with the US, how that kind of impacts the EU-UK ties. But going even wider, looking at things like foreign policy and how Labour's position on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, how kind of what they want to do about sanctions, wider foreign policy. Do you think that's changed really between the Tory government and the now Labour government, Eleanor?
I think so. David Lammy did make a big. He spoke a lot about kind of dirty money and sanctions on the election campaign. It was something he was, very passionate about. Just last week we had a package of sanctions which were a kind of thematic sanctions. They were anti-corruption sanctions. And I read actually in the press release, they used the word corrupt or corruption 22 times. So it's not very subtle. But I think it's showing that you can use sanctions for sort of different political agendas. It's not just human rights abuses or war. They also, if you want to, focus on anti-corruption and the City of London's role in that, that's something I think they're pushing forward.
Okay, great. Right, we are very close to being out of time, and I know we've got a packed day, so I think I will leave it there. It just remains me to say thank you to my top team. You'll see more of us throughout the day as we are interviewing some great panellists. And Hannah is up next with a panel discussion on banking regulation. So I think if you just bear with us for about 30 seconds while we put some more chairs on the stage, and thank you very much, everyone.